Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay. That's good. As well as an advocate and lived experienced partner for multiple organizations. I wear several hats. Along the way, I've connected with many recipients, donor families, living donors, caregivers, and one theme that's always stands out is the gap in care that supports post-transplant donor families. And that's why I reached out to Amy because we need to begin that conversation about strengthening support and ensuring patients and families feel informed and supported. Amy has over 20 years of experience supporting youth, families, and adults across Ontario through some of the most life challenging moments. Her work focuses on connection between the body and mind with a strong background in trauma care. Amy's connection to the transplant community is both personal and professional. After walking closely alongside a friend through a liver transplant, she came to understand how emotionally complex the transplant journey can be, not just during the surgery itself, but in the waiting, the recovery, and life that follows. Since then, through her private therapy practice, Amy has supported many transplant recipients and family members seeking therapy before transplant, during recovery, and long after transplant. Amy holds a Master of Social Work from the University of Windsor, along with degree and diplomas in family and community social services, child and youth care, and social services work. She also holds certificates in CBT, BDT, trauma focused therapy, and child and adolescent mental health. Her experience includes work in schools, crisis response with CMHA, and community justice intervention and private trauma therapy. So thank you, Amy,
It
for
sounds
agreeing
so
to.
good.
You do. Thank you so much for agreeing to engage in this important conversation. And I will hand it over to you.
Okay, awesome.
Hmm.
Welcome everybody. I'm glad that you could make it. This is being recorded now. So if I don't know, sometimes it's just the speaker that comes up, but hopefully we'll have a little room for questions at the end and that part won't be recorded, okay? So we're just going to dive right in. So obviously we're here to talk about the mental health along the organ transplant journey. And really maybe even a little further than that because we have a lot of mental health is everyone has mental health and so a lot of different things come into everyone's unique situation. So we're going to try to maybe include that in when Kathleen and I are chatting. If there is, so this, the PowerPoint I kind of set up has, some points for transplant recipients and caregivers. But if you are a part of a donor family and you're here and you're watching, there's lots of great things for you in this too. Trauma and grief are very much intermingling. So a lot of these different strategies that we're going to talk about today, they also kind of really apply kind of across the spectrum here, okay? So the first thing I actually want to do is just point out that we are going to be talking about some things that could be traumatic, past trauma for you. And if anything does come up and you need to kind of take a moment for yourself, feel free to do that. You can always email me any, personal questions. I'm going to provide my email afterwards so you can kind of if there's something really personal and you kind of want that answered or something comes up for you, please feel free to reach out to me through email. And yeah, I can answer your question through email or we can kind of have a talk or something as well. No problem doing that. So, first thing I want to do is just kind of get everybody in a space to kind of listen and kind of take some stuff in here. So, one of the very first strategies I work with all my clients is just really simple, talking about how to kind of get in the space to be really regulated and ready to learn. So, everybody talks about breath work. I'm sure you've all heard about the thousands of different kinds of breath work, but something that a lot of people don't understand is just like the mechanics behind it. So when we breathe in, our heartbeat actually goes a little bit faster. Maybe your heart recipients out there, maybe you already know this. Um, But when we breathe in, our heart rate goes a little faster. And that's kind of symbolic to more of our survival modes that we get into. And when we breathe out, our heart actually slows down a little bit. Lots of biology around that. Um, but what I want to do right now is just a quick little demonstration about how this works. So if you kind of just sit back and notice yourself, notice your body. I'm a little nervous, so this is going to be maybe more for me than you guys, but um, you just breathe in and you're just kind of noticing your body. And we're going to do an actual breath with a slow, long exhale. Then we're just going to check back in with your body and you're just going to notice and see if there's differences. Okay, so just check in with your body now. You're just going to take a deep breath in and then a slow exhale. And just kind of take stock there. All right. So if you ever find yourself anxious or something's coming up for you during this session or even in life, just remind yourself to take a long exhale. All right. Okay, let's dive on in. So this presentation, we're going to be talking about a bunch of different things. These are just some of the things we're going to be talking about. Not sure if we're going to get to the end. Hopefully we will. But we're just going to kind of dive in. The first one's going to be talking about the emotional struggle after transplant. Of course, there's a lot of things that happen during, but we're going to be kind of talking about life after transplant on this webinar. Okay, there's going to be other ones that talk about different things. So, but on this one, we're going to try to just focus on that. And then we're just going to have these different kind of points come in. So let's get started. All right. So, Kathleen, we kind of chatted about this yesterday a little bit. And one of the reasons why you might notice a lot of lagging emotion or a lot of things coming up after you've experienced your transplant and you've kind of healed from that is that you kind of come out of this survival mode. So while you're in a survival mode, our brain and body does this wonderful things and it allows us to get really practical, like get those check boxes out. Okay, I need to go to this doctor's appointment. I'm going to do that. I need to be like this. Okay, then this is going to happen. Then this is going to happen. Then this is going to happen. It's very helpful and very protective. To not, have all of the emotions overwhelm all the time. So, of course, there would have been times prior to your surgery that you would have been overwhelmed for sure. But for the most part, you can kind of understand that you're in a survival mode there. So, a lot of the processing kind of gets put on pause. And after transplant, once you've healed, a lot of things kind of start to come up. One of the major, you know, parts of this is that you're healed. So all the support was that was there before, it might be dwindling a little bit, you know. I kind of compared this to like if you have a tornado go through your house, you're not really thinking about, okay, yes, you're emotional and you're kind of going through the moments there, but you're in this like survival mode and you're thinking about like insurance, where you're going to live that night, that kind of survival mode that's there. A lot of emotions, a lot of tension, lots of things going on, but you're not necessarily processing what everything just happened, right? So for the recipients, you can notice a lot of emotional distress after transplant, right? When it's done and it's over with. Now, what do you do? And then for caregivers, that's about your adrenaline is dropping. You know, you've watched your loved one go through, you've been there for them, you've been very motivated to be there for them, but now you're getting tired and that crash is starting to come. Does that make sense there, Kathleen, to you? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you said about the supports and stuff too. Like it's often, when you're sick and everybody's rallying around you, and then as you get better, you have less. I think we talked about it yesterday, and I kind of almost the example is like when I lost my mom, like I had, you're on adrenaline, you have to do things, you got to get things done, this. And then it wasn't until after all of that that I, broke down and cried and was emotional and, people were, bringing me food and doing everything. And then everything kind of stopped. And I had, I was alone with my own thoughts and with the transplant now I'm alone with my own thoughts going like, I almost died, right? I planned my funeral. Now I'm planning my life. So how do you then navigate, get past all of that, traumatic stress and all that, right?
Yeah, exactly traumatic stress. This is exactly what we're talking about. It is almost like post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, like you had trauma your entire journey, and not only with this issue about trauma, but about, sorry, transplant, but you've had trauma before, probably in different parts of your life. And when you have a life threat like this appear in your life, often unresolved trauma really comes into play as well. Kind of turns up the volume on what this all means. But yes, you're right. That's another great example there, Kathleen, about, when you lose someone, you do get really practical. A lot of people shelf a lot of things for a long period of time until they feel like, okay, I'm safe enough now to actually feel some of this stuff, you know? Mhm. So, just a little bit of insight on this is your nervous system. We're going to have a whole podcast on the nervous system's role in, identifying danger, life threat, how it becomes dysregulated, and the adaptive features of that you can start to look at that and whether or not your nervous system has regulated again. We're going to have another whole podcast about this. But when that system leaves this crisis mode, you are left over with a whole bunch of things with limited support now, as like how you mentioned, Kathleen, as your supports have kind of moved on and aren't available, not as available for you anymore. And that was a big thing that a lot of people talked about in that survey that we put out there, was that the support just kind of ends, if there was any at all, right? So your delayed emotional response between recipient and your caregiver, it can be this combined shared trauma as well. Um, so you have to keep that in mind. There's like so many things going on. You as a recipient, yes, you've experienced your own very deep personal um, it, trauma, internal trauma, and external trauma by watching your families go through things as well. And your caregiver, they've also experienced their sense of almost losing you as a recipient and their reality and all the things that go along with almost losing someone.
There's
So
a comment, sorry, Amy, there's a comment in the chat
yeah,
that basically says, and she says, yes, exactly. As a caregiver for my sister after liver transplant, I was like, what do I do now? Right? It's kind of that, and so I guess she's saying that this makes sense, right?
yeah, yeah. In a future slide here, we're going to talk about that identity shift
Yeah.
as well.
And then just another one, traumatic to go from expecting to die and accepting death is your future, and then all of a sudden you're not dead, and talk about having to pivot. So, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty big pivot. I mean,
Yeah.
and not only did you didn't just pivot there, you had to pivot from living a life and then getting a diagnosis and then knowing that you're going to need a transplant and knowing how far you have or how close to death you have to come. And that's a big pivot too, right? And then pivoting back. Mhm. So on all these slides, I'm just going to have a little shared strategy. They're very surface strategies, okay? Everybody is very unique. So these are very surface strategies, but I think they're helpful no matter what. Just like a simple breath that can change your state. Some of these simple strategies, they're just seeds to plant in yourself or your loved one that is dealing with some kind of trauma like this. So a shared strategy here would be just to name what's actually happening. A lot of people don't have the language for it. It makes sense when you're in survival modes or experiencing a stress response or trauma response you don't have access to the usual language that you would have, or the usual understanding you would have, or the connection even to the people that love you and care for you. It's not as strong. You're in kind of like a different kind of state. You've moved away from that. So you want to try to really make an intent, like be intentional about like just naming what's happening for you. So, you could say something like our bodies or my body is adjusting to now to this emergency, this crisis, and now it's over. So now I'm going to need to adjust. Okay. So just like I'm going to share these slides. So it reduces fear and self-blame, right? Let's just move on here. So, yeah, pressure to move on once the body stabilizes. So, physical recovery is mistaken for that emotional completion. So, this is kind of where medical models and wellness models like holistic mental health and other holistic models really start to differ, right? Where your emotional health is not, I mean, it's not something that we can put an x-ray on or see healing, right? So it's often it's not overlooked. I totally think that medical professionals, and I'm sure you guys have become very close with some of your medical teams where they absolutely do care, but every system has limitations, and every specialist has what they kind of know and care for. Like I couldn't talk to you about your liver disease. I don't know about it. I couldn't talk to you about the meds that you should take or even supplements. It's outside of my scope. So a lot of I can know a lot about it, but I might not, have the ways to help you and support you in that way. So, but this is really kind of where that whole idea of in a medical model, you're healed. Go forth, live your life. Bye. You know, so you just kind of want to notice for recipients that pressure that you have to feel good. Like, oh no, I feel good now. I should feel really great. I am going to go back to just like how I was before. And then for caregivers, kind of shifting um, that attention away from the crisis. And now what? Just like your comment there that you had earlier here. And the role that you played and how important it was, and how now what is your role? What is your role with your sister? What is your role with your partner? A little bit different when it comes to kids, but they don't need you in that kind of way, but yet you've really become accustomed to checking on them at night, making sure they were okay, being a little hyper vigilant to their needs. Mhm. So as that external support fades, you know, and that I guess it's almost like a social construct that comes in because even your friends and things like that might be like, all right, you're so much better. Let's go, let's go and live a life, even that kind of part. Or you feel like almost like you're burdening people by talking more and more and like about what happened to you. You feel like that burden or a little bit of like a lot of guilt inside for bringing that up again. You want to start talking about them, their families, who they just broke up with, something like that, right? Um, but you know, it doesn't mean that the things that you're going through aren't valid. And I think that that's something that's really important for everyone to know. There come at the beginning and the ends are always really difficult. And I think that that's something that a lot of people and society in general just kind of overlook as part of this journey, you know. Mhm. Um, so I share, you definitely want to start talking about this, your friends and family and other people, and, even for caregivers, I'm sure you have a caregiver system of you. We all want to take care of each other when you care about someone and you love someone. And that's really, really important. So as a caregiver, you probably have caregivers that are taking care of you while you're caregiving for the other person, right? And they even might have someone caregiving for them because they're worried about you and who's caregiving for the, yeah, anyway. But you just kind of want to make sure that you're having these conversations and you're kind of externalizing some of that internal, those internal feelings and that guilt, or you're just kind of externalizing some of that. Mhm. Um, so yeah, shift the shame outward and it restores your permission to need support because you do need support. And remind yourself that these people in your world love you and care about you, and you're not a burden to them. That is for sure. All right. So here's this identity shift that we were kind of talking about earlier there, Kathleen. I think we had some comments in there.
Hmm.
Yeah. What was um what was your experience there when you had your surgery and came out of that, and now what? Who are you?
You're at me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, sometimes it feels like a fever dream, not gonna lie. Like, it feels like it happened so long ago, and I have to remind myself it was only 3 years ago. And I mean, I really didn't have, I didn't have a lot of expectations because I didn't think I was going to survive the surgery just because of other complications, bleeding and blood pressure. And so when I was actually like there, I was like, kind of like, okay, like now what? And I was determined. So I was, determined to get up and start healing and whatever. And then my life personally has just gone in a whole different direction, just being able to give it back and, honor my donor by living my life to the fullest. Not taking advantage of another day, living each day like, it's a gift because it is, whether it's advocacy or we talked earlier, zip lining, doing something, just kind of being able to honor that, that gift. And some people will say, "Oh, why didn't you do this or why don't you do that?" And I'm like, because that would not be honoring, the gift that I've been given. So just taking care of myself and my body and my mind as much as I can, and paying it forward, right? Living each day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You will have like this, um, your whole community here. It did get a gift. 100%. And I know we're talking about some of the more negative kind of parts to this, but that is something to keep in mind for sure. So you are very grateful. And just
And
because you're grateful doesn't mean though that you're not going to have other feelings too.
exactly. And I mean, I am, and it doesn't mean that I don't have, PTSD
Yeah,
from planning my funeral, and
right,
doing that kind of stuff, and survivor's guilt. Like I think that's something that we all have. Like, well, I celebrate moments with my family. Somebody is not celebrating those moments with my family, like be it Christmas or different things where I'm, so thankful that I can do that. Somebody else in their family has an empty chair. There's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't think of that. So, you know
right. Yeah,
it's the fine line between living life, but also not throwing it in people's faces that have lost somebody so that I can have a life, right?
yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, every time we go through something, so first of all, we're always learning and always growing and always changing. This is a human condition. We might have things that stay the same for sure, but for the most part, you're not the same person that you were 5 years ago, whether or not you've had a life-saving surgery or not, you know? We always change, we always grow, we're always learning. And when we're not, is actually when we notice a lot of we're stuck. We might notice a lot of mental health things coming up and a lot of physical things too, right? But when you've come through something like this, you are a changed person, right? So any kind of trauma, I'm talking like even the recognition when you suddenly a light bulb turns on, it's like, that was actually really traumatic. You can start to notice a lot of different things about yourself. When you go through some kind of situation like this, or a loss of some sort, really what we are talking about with the transplant is a kind of a loss, you know? Mhm. So you do have this So adults don't love the unknown. Okay. Kids do great with unknown things. They live in a world that they don't know anything. They're just like totally like, yeah, my mom's going to take care of me or whatever. My caretaker is there for me and they're going to make great decisions for me. But adults, we don't love the unknown. So even after your surgery, you have a lot of unknowns and a lot of different things to learn, right? You have a whole you have to stay on meds, and what does that mean? And how certain you've experienced something where you don't, you have to kind of think about what the universe, like we send our kids to school and we think, oh yeah, the universe, the universe is safe, the world is safe. My kids are returning to me, right? Um, it's the same thing with something like this. You walk out into the world and you get in your car and you go to work and you're going to survive it. And of course you're going to live. And you don't have that kind of storyline going through. You don't have that narrative, but there is a narrative after you've gone through something like this about your own mortality, about mortality just in general, and kind of like that story of the end of life. It's very real for you. Mhm. So you will have a shift in your identity and there will be a who I was before and who I am after. And there's grief in the loss of who you were before all this happened. And there's a big, it's probably maybe some anxiety and depression attached to, and guilt and fear and blame attached to this unknown, now what kind of future that you have. And those feelings are, um, so all your feelings actually, there's no good or bad feelings. Everybody has emotions, right? And all emotions are adaptive. And so are all the different states we get in. So your thoughts and your feelings and these different states we get in, your body and your mind thinks that it's very helpful and it's really adaptive for you. So all of your feelings that you're having, they're they're trying to tell you something, you know. Anxiety is trying to get you ready for something, you know. So, um, so you might have uncertainty about who you are, and some meds, right? Even your meds there, they might cause little personality changes in you. Definitely, all meds, no matter if you've experienced a transplant or not, when you start a new med, one of the things that your body has to get used to this new med. So you might experience, you might not even be consciously aware that you are so different, right? Um, so it might be your family and friends that are like, hey, are you all right? Or, maybe even concerned about you a little bit, right? So the med get adjustment to the meds, or even just kind of like this whole idea of like, I got to build my new identity now. Who am I in this world? That might be the thing that's affecting you. But, ultimately, you got to look holistically about what that's all about. Um, and then for caregivers, you got your burnout, caregiver burnout, and your identity of being the strong one all the time. You always have to be that strong one for that person. You're not going to let them, you don't want them to feel bad about how you're feeling about their situation, even though they will. Um, uh, that whole like being the strong one, it lingers. I don't know if Kathleen, you're a recipient there. Did you notice your caregiver kind of lingering in that I'm the strong one identity?
Yeah, in my situation, it was kind of unique in the sense where my husband was just he was in denial for so long. Everything was gonna be fine. Everything was gonna be fine. We had to have a tough love moment to say like, no, it's not going to be fine. And I find now even my husband, my kids or whatever, they're like everything, every little thing. Did you call your team? Did you call your team? Did your team know? Like if I have, a sniffle, I have whatever. Does your team know? Just make sure that like everything, it's like, yes, it's a cold. Or like, does your team know? So I can't do anything without them making sure that it's supposed to be that way or whatever, even now. Yeah.
Mhm. Oh, staying in the caregiver role for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another one. Yeah, yeah. And it's probably still pretty worried about just the unpredictable nature of life in general, kind of going back to like thinking about how safe this world is or how it's not. We do live in a very unpredictable world where things are constantly happening, constantly changing out there in the environment. So even when you think about something like COVID coming along, well, nobody saw that coming along. Well, it means something completely different to this community than it does to the general population, right?
Yeah. And I think
And
always, I mean, and I can only speak for me and people that I know personally. I don't know everybody on here, but I know we always have that looming, like every appointment, every blood test, that whole like, is there any rejection? Is this gonna, whatever, like we're in constant fear of, in my case, going back to dialysis if need be, or, rejection or it not lasting and having to go, get sick again, like that sort of thing. So that's always, in my mind anyway, always in the back of my mind, which is why I do what I can every day, because who knows, right?
right. Yeah. Um, and really, like all those things are going to shift who you are in those moments pretty quickly, you know, pretty quickly. So, once again, that's just your body and brain being awesome and being adaptive and trying to keep you alive, right? So we have to learn to like befriend all those different kinds of emotions and those thoughts and feelings that come up. You have to kind of learn how to befriend that and in like understand that that is just, you have to integrate that part of you now, you know? Mhm. Okay, so everyone loses a role that defined them during the crisis moment or during, from the time you start to realize, like, oh, I'm ill, to I need an organ transplant, to, okay, I'm going in for surgery, to the next, and then beyond. There's little different roles that everybody takes along the way. But after you've kind of had this surgery, all those roles need to be redefined. So, one of the strategies here is really opening up that communication about, if you're a recipient, what do you need from the person that took care of you now? What do you need from them now? How can you mentioned, Kathleen, what you needed from them in the moment was even like really important. And having those conversations then, it's still important to have those conversations afterward. Um, they everybody loves to be communicative, but let me tell you, when you start to have these conversations, what happens? Well, a lot of emotion comes up, and suddenly maybe someone starts to feel bad or angry or starts to cry and tell you they don't want to lose that role in your life, or it feels there's a lot, it's just filled with emotion, these kinds of redefining your roles, but really important to have those conversations, right? Because
There's great comments in the comment
yeah,
section.
go
That
ahead.
there's great comments, Amy, too, in the comment section, if you can see in the chat.
I'm leaving the chat up to you, Kathleen.
Okay, they're long, so I'll let you read them, whatever. But just basically, yeah, it kind of reinforces the caregiver and their emotions and everything too. So if everybody can see those, that would be great too.
Hmm. Do you think it's something I need to kind of address right now? You think it'd be helpful?
Um,
Let me click it. I'm reading the last one.
mhm.
Mhm. Right. The processing does become kind of messy in your head. That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. When you start to process everything that's happened to you afterward, and you got these like, oh my gosh, I'm so thankful, I'm so grateful, I'm alive, this is great. And then you got like, oh my gosh, this is so hard, I'm having such a bad day, I don't feel good. Oh my God, what does that mean? Oh, so many things start to fly around. So when you notice all these thoughts and all this stuff going around in your head, you're having a lot of different body reactions too. There's probably a lot of energy and stress and um, balled up kind of like gut feelings, and your heart hurts a little bit and it feels heavy, or you feel hot, or you feel cold, or like lots of different things going on inside your body too, right? So that was a good way to put it there. So yeah, just kind of communicating, well, first of all, thinking about who like you do need to create space for yourself to think about like, who am I now? What is my normal going to be? Um, like I've changed. It's kind of really important for you to talk through with someone or, one of your caregivers, someone you love, or even like maybe a medical professional that you're close with or a therapist, 100%. Um, we're going to kind of talk about that in a later one too, but yeah, so just thinking about why support is needed after success. So continued mental health support is needing after a transplant. And then for family and caregivers, just kind of admitting that yeah, you're allowed to go and seek help for yourself. So of course, I have not had a organ transplant. But I do have a friend that's in the community, and I actually know through her many of you. So, just kind of listening and hearing all these stories, you kind of really see the differences. And even with that survey, that was out there a few weeks ago, a lot of people commented just the varying differences between provinces, between hospitals, about how much support you actually are getting for your mental health, right? And sometimes people think, yeah, it was awesome. It was great. I had what I needed. I had availability for that while I was in touch with the hospital and while I was going there a lot, or maybe this program, or I ran into this great group program. That was another thing that kind of came out. But once that's gone, you have to think about your mental health as this lifelong kind of like uh, maintenance, your mental wellness and your health, your general health in general is it's lifelong. It doesn't just stop or start when things happen. Do you kind of like have intensified emotions or intensified challenges 100% along the way? But just because it's over doesn't mean that you can't go back and kind of start to process some of this stuff to be a healthy version of yourself today, especially if you're noticing stuff coming up today. So, um, it, it's an ending, but it's really a transition into this new identity, into what your life is going to be like in the future. And you can go out there and you have to really own that at a certain point for yourself. And this is whether or not even this is just general in life stuff, is that you have to really own that every system that we are involved in has a lot of limitations. And when it comes to the medical model, I mean, one of their limitations is that they just can't provide that long-term mental health for everybody that comes in contact with that system, right? So you really have to own that. And I'm going to tell you, it's really hard to go out there and find someone that specializes in supporting someone after transplant. It's very specific, right? Or groups and stuff out there like I was actually trying to like find a way to create a resource for this community to kind of be able to, oh, there's this group or that group and really most of the things are in the hospital where you would have limited access after you weren't having those medical procedures anymore. Is that kind of what you all have experienced?
Yeah, in the comments, it's saying that's very difficult to find anything post-transplant. And I said, in my experience with a lot of different people and places and wherever, that is a very common thing. Once you're not a patient, there is not a lot of resources. I can tell you, kind of, sort of, I am part of another system that is in the process of making changes, and this is being heard. So I'm not going to say it's going to take a long time because everything government does. It is being heard and it is in the process, but it will take a very long time. So that's why we need something, I guess, as a community kind of in the meantime, because we can't rely on resources that aren't available. But it is, I mean, it's coming. It's just going to be slow.
Right. But like for example, if you try to find a therapist, like I can't even find myself. So there's that, right? If you like Google therapists that help post-transplant organ transplant, it's like, yeah, I mean, a few people randomly will come up and they like, I don't know, it's just hard to find that search, it's hard. So yeah, Sandra, thanks for putting your hand up and asking a question.
Hi,
Are
Amy.
you okay that this is being videoed, Sandra?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of work in this area for a long time, and I've seen a lot of my friends suffer with mental health, and I looked into the research. I'm glad that you and Kathleen are dealing with this as well. But yeah, it's very common, like, within 1 or 2 years for people that have had a transplant to suffer from mental health. And so the Canadian Donation Transplant Research Program, the theme that I lead is long-term outcomes, and we look at a lot to do with mental health, exercise, nutrition. And one of the things that we want to do is a thing called PROMs, patient-reported outcome measurements. So what we want to do is when people go to a clinic or like to follow up on a transplant, it's all about their numbers. It's all about how well their organ or their graft is doing. But we want to focus on the other things, and there's always never a time to talk about that. I'm not sleeping well, I feel depressed, my back hurts, and all these kind of things. So this prom will be able to, set the appointment. However, as you said, and you work in this field, Amy, there's not a lot of resources out there, and unless you have insurance, unless you have coverage, it's very difficult. And even within the hospitals, I mean, they've been like transferring people out of the main hospitals because they just can't handle the volumes. And that's a good thing because there's many that have had transplants, but they just can't. So, peer support groups and things like that, but it definitely does need to be addressed. It's a big, huge elephant that, people just put aside, and we can't because, we don't want people to have a transplant and then be depressed, right? That's not the whole point. So.
Yeah, and you're right. A lot of the research is about, it has a lot to do with numbers. And then, like, I don't know if you found this, Sandra, but when they're doing these post kind of transplant stuff, they're talking about numbers of, like, sure, the whatever organ, how it's doing. But they're also, if they're looking anything to do with mental health, it's how does that kind of if they're depressed, how does that talk about like if they're going to take their medication or not?
Yeah, medical adherence, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and it can impact, and that's the thing that they have to realize because it can impact the quality of life, right?
oh, I don't think the research is, there is a lot of research that directly connects a decline of mental health. So if you do suffer from PTSD, depression, acute anxiety, that, it can affect how long you survive afterward. And a death rate goes up along with that mental health of if you do have PTSD, depression, acute anxiety,
Yeah.
you do
One of
have
the things
less
that
medical
you
adherence.
touched on, which is important as well, that took me some time, is there's grief that you're dealing with, the grief of who you were. Your career is gone, you couldn't have children, like, who you were as an individual, and that's all gone. And then there's also guilt of surviving because not everyone does.
Mhm.
So there's just so many things around it. So it's a very hard topic to manage.
Mhm. And something you mentioned there too that's really important is when you are taking ownership of this, um, this is kind of like a little bit of an empowerment kind of thing. Like you really do got to own your own health, and there is a little bit of, that cognition of, I'm alone out here. I have to do this, like I have to do this for me now. There's some truth to that statement. And you do have to really work hard and reach out and talk to people and find the people, right? And Sandra, you mentioned that, if you don't have benefits and things like that, it's a huge limitation, right? So, um, but I think like something to keep in mind is even if you don't have benefits, reach out to professionals, talk to people, even go into private practice therapy and talk to people and talk about sliding scales. A lot of people offer sliding scales. If you know there's a lot of people that do groups and they create groups from the amount of people that reach out to them and talk about something. So it's really important for you to kind of go ahead and if you find someone that you think, a lot of times we search on like something like Psychology Today and we're like, oh, that person looks like a person. But you want to kind of think about searching directly for people that deal with, chronic illness, medical trauma, PTSD. Um, and it's not to say like you're labeling yourself with having any of that stuff, but it can be really beneficial to work with a professional that can uniquely tailor that therapy to what your needs are, right? So I really encourage everybody to, if you feel like you want to talk to someone, but cost is a barrier for you, just keep asking. You're going to run into someone that wants to help and will do something with cost for you. I really want to encourage you to do that. Mhm.
Sandra just added in the chat, better health is good too. So I don't,
Yes, better health is good.
yeah.
There's a lot of, even if you get to talk, like, there's a lot of really open general therapies that if you just want someone to talk to, they can go down all the way down to like $30, $45. You know what I mean? If you just want to start to explore some of these things. If you have something that's more to do with PTSD and you need like further, more intensive treatment, I mean, there's lots of things that many professionals that I know in their private practices will definitely offer a sliding scale for that. If they see like, hey, this person really needs something. I don't want to let them go forth. Yeah. Okay. So, I'm just gonna see. Yeah, that was basically it. So, I mean, I just kind of left this open for some questions. I know that I didn't come close to dealing with all the things, and that's why we're going to have more kind of focused things. I'm just going to stop recording and then I can maybe answer some questions. Just, in case these questions get a little personal, I'm just going to stop the recording.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.